Thank you, everyone. That was such a good introduction. I don't know if there's anything else I have to say. I made it here. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. As you can probably tell from hearing me speak, I am not from Virginia. I was born in the New Jersey area, outside of Philadelphia, and I'll be giving you a story today. Give me about 40 minutes of your time. The theme of this conference is engagement. And one of the things that I've gotten to experience as a patient advocate and an advisor is a wave of patient engagement. And I think this story is going to show you why that's so important. And I commend VCU for bringing a patient in here to talk to you today. But to kick off this session, I think I'm the only person speaking that has their initials in front of their name instead of behind it. So it's a very, very big honor for me to be here to speak with you today. Two quick things. One, here's all my information. If you have anything you want to tweet out or email me or ask questions during the session, by all means, go ahead. I've given up my HIPAA rights a long time ago, and I'm very willing and happy to share whatever it is that you may be wondering about this journey. The second part of this is that we will have a Q&A. There will be a session this afternoon for a panel session, but if there's anything you want to ask, we'll have a few minutes at the end before the break. So feel free. There's 2 mics. If in the middle of this you have a question, just raise your hand. So without further ado, let's get started. This is my story. And the story, we kind of heard already where the story is going, but it actually begins when I was 25. Come on up. There we go. There we go. All right. When I was 25, I was an IT project manager living outside of New York City. Was actually in the pharmaceutical industry and kind of understood this whole thing called clinical research from an IT perspective, never thinking that one day it might apply to me. I went to the dermatologist because I had this spot on my chest that my mother and my girlfriend were nagging me about to get checked out, and so I finally did it just to shut them up. And 2 days later, the doctor called and said, "You need to get to NYU Medical Center and not believe everything you read on the internet about melanoma." So when I got home and Googled melanoma, I realized I had just become a young adult cancer patient. And I didn't know what to do, so we went to NYU, got it removed, as you kind of see right there. That's the picture right after my surgery. And I thought, man, I really dodged a bullet here. Thank goodness. And I did what every melanoma patient would do. I wore floppy hats. I wore long sleeve shirts, put on lots of sunscreen. And then I moved to Florida. And that is where I met Jen. And here's us in 2008. A pretty happy start to a new life in Florida with sunscreen and hats and all the other stuff. And then we had, there we go. Then we had little Josie in 2010. Sorry, this is not advancing. There we go. And Tommy in 2012. And this is a pretty happy family now. We're happy. We all look healthy. And we're in a really great place. 4 weeks after this picture was taken, I went back to the same hospital with what I thought was a spiking fever. The ER doctor took a look at a chest x-ray and some blood work. And said, with these spots on your lungs and your history of melanoma, I'm afraid you have a recurrence of your cancer. I said, wait a minute, doc. I got a month-old son at home. You must have gotten my charts switched with somebody else. And as doctors so often are, they were right. He admitted me to the hospital. I don't know why it doesn't move. There we go. He admitted me to the hospital. and I left 16 days later with an 8-centimeter tumor removed from my small bowel and 4 others spread across my lungs, my liver, and my spleen. So when I left there, I officially had a stage 4 melanoma diagnosis. For those of you who aren't familiar with melanoma, it's the deadliest skin cancer there is. And when I was diagnosed in 2000, I had a 90-some% chance of living 5 years and just having this be a part of a past. Unfortunately, in 2012, stage 4 melanoma offered about an 18-month median lifespan, and 9 out of every 10 people that were in my shoes would be dead in less than 5 years. And I had a 2-year-old and a 4-week-old. So when I left that hospital, I had a few more things than just this stage 4 melanoma diagnosis. The first thing I had were these goals. And I set out, being a project manager, the one thing I wanted to do was I want to set goals. And my goal was to get a durable response. I didn't want a chance to live a few more months, to maybe see the next milestone. I wanted a chance to watch my kids grow up, to be a part of my family. I wanted to get healthy. During that hospital stay, I lost 30 pounds. Could barely walk, couldn't pick up my son. I wanted to go do normal things like be an usher at my cousin's wedding. And since we live in Fort Lauderdale, I wanted to take the family to Disney World. To do all that, I had this realization that I had a bigger purpose. It was, at that point, I was happy and healthy until my diagnosis, but I don't know that I had that purpose in life. You kind of have that come to Jesus moment when someone tells you you have less than 18 months to live. So my purpose wasn't to be a cancer survivor. It was to be a dad. It was to be a husband, to be a brother and an uncle to my niece and nephew, to be a part of my family. But to get through all of that, I needed to find that treatment that was going to give me the chance to fulfill that purpose. And the hurdles you're going to see here that I had to navigate past, they may be unique in some ways, but they're fairly representative of what patients have to go through to try to find the right treatment for the right person at the right time. So the next part of this becomes the hope. Now, saying I was fortunate to have a stage 4 melanoma diagnosis probably sounds a little funny, but it was, in a sense, that if I got diagnosed with cancer in 2012, melanoma is probably the one you wanted to have. Because while I was in that hospital for those 16 days, I continued to Google melanoma. And I realized not only how bad things were, but how hopeful they might be as well. At that time, immunotherapies were just taking off. The first one had been approved about a year prior, and there was promise. There was that hope that there is a treatment out there that for some people offers not just the chance for a little bit longer life, but to get that durable response for something that might be one day considered a cure. So I left that hospital with that diagnosis, but also with the hope that I could find something out there in the clinical research world that was going to give me a chance to watch those kids grow up. And we walked into my oncologist's office. He gave me my tumor report. Here's your mutation type. You're not eligible for these targeted therapies. Basically, here's standard of care chemotherapy. Good luck. I knew from doing all that Googling in the hospital, that's not what I wanted. That wasn't good enough for me. My wife, on the other hand, who was at home with a 2-year-old, a 4-week-old, a husband in the cancer center, and her in-laws from New Jersey for 2 weeks, She did not have as much time as I did to figure out what the heck was going on. So she very unaware asked the oncologist, "What are we looking at here, doc? How much time do we have?" And he very bluntly responded with, "I'll be surprised if your husband is here in 2 years." Talk about setting goals. That was my first. I actually wrote that on my phone. I pulled my phone out and I'm like, all right, in 2 years and a day, this guy is going to get a letter from me. And he did too. He's still, if we have one Christmas card to send out, he gets it. So we left the hospital, and it was a down day. That was tough to hear. But I knew there was hope out there. And we decided that wasn't good enough. So we went on 4 second opinions. And we finally found an oncologist that was willing to offer us an immunotherapy clinical trial. He actually offered 2. The first one was a trial for this new type of drug called an anti-PD-1 drug. The second trial was a sequence of drugs that were all immunotherapies, including something called TIL, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, which you guys probably know more about than I do. But it's where a tumor is removed from you, and the best T cells that can fight your specific cancer are identified, and then they're expanded in the laboratory and reinfused back in you. It's real Star Trek type medicine. And that sounded really good. This sounds like personalized medicine. This sounds like something that I want to do because it's going to give me a chance to fulfill that purpose, to reach those goals. Let's sign up, doc. By the way, how have people done on this before? And he said, well, as far as we know, you're the first person to try this in this sequence. Oh. So you're telling me that no one has ever failed this before. Let's give it a shot. I don't know how many patients would have heard that and hightailed it out the door. I don't know how many other people do 4 second opinions to look for the right treatment for them. I do know that, as Dr. Melton said, there's a lot of people that don't have the right access to the right medicine to give them that hope, the chance that they can have to live a longer life, a healthier life, a better life. Clinical research fails because patients can't find trials that are right for them, don't know about trials that are right for them. I'm lucky. I was able, with the help of a couple of friends and a background in the industry and the means to go to 4 different second opinions, that I found something that worked for me. But how many people that were in my shoes didn't have that chance? So, we packed our family up from Fort Lauderdale, and, hold on a second. The head's supposed to move right there. Apparently it's not. Well, imagine that head moving all the way up to Tampa. We packed up our family and moved up to the Tampa area, where Moffitt Cancer Center and an excellent melanoma team were. And we got there. This is in September of 2012. And I signed my informed consent, a lengthy informed consent, and said, all right, let's go. This is the Star Trek medicine. Let's get this thing started. And the doctor said, all right, well, we're ready to go. The medicine's even here. We just have one small problem. The contract between the site and the sponsors, we're just dotting I's and crossing T's. It's going to be signed. So just be patient. So I was patient for a week, for 2 weeks, for 4 weeks. And now over a month later, I called the oncologist. I said, hey, that contract, the dotting I's and crossing T's, it's taking a really long time to do that. I'm now 3 months into this 24-month death sentence, and I'm still waiting to get on treatment. He said, there's 5 different, we have 2 sponsors, and we have an IRB, and our lawyers, and there's a large donation from a private foundation. So every time something changes on a contract, we have 5 lawyers that have to agree on something. I don't know if you guys have dealt with 5 lawyers before. I'm married to 1, and that's hard enough. So he said, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to tell you. You should probably consider moving to Plan B. And I stopped him. Last month, you told me that my best chance, there we go, of seeing this little boy go to college or walking this little girl down the aisle was this trial. And now, because a piece of paper isn't signed, that I'm going to lose that chance. I'm going to lose some of that hope. He said, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, doc, thanks. Got off the phone with him. And the first thing I did was go on LinkedIn, and I found 2 people I knew that worked at one of the sponsor companies, and shot them a quick email and said, hey, can you go down to compliance or legal, whoever has this contract, and get them to sign this thing. I need this medicine. I kind of figured this is the New Jersey part of me coming out. That wasn't good enough. So I picked up the phone, and I called the global 1-800 number for a very large pharmaceutical company. And the woman who answers, hello. I said, hi, I'm a cancer patient, and I have a concern about one of your clinical trial drugs. And that's the best way to get to the legal department of any pharma company in the world. Right over. And I explained the situation to the woman who answered, and she was very compassionate and very sorry and very unhelpful. I said, I'm sorry, our document isn't processed, was the words that she said. And I go, to you, this is a document. But to me, it's my life. And I'm not going to sit around and wait while a piece of paper is waiting for a signature. And she's like, can I call you back? And then I give her a few more things that I thought about paper pushing and contracts. If you've seen the movie Office Space, you'll understand this. If you haven't, you should watch it. 3 days later, my oncologist called and said, I don't know what you did or what you said, but we just got a call from the sponsors. We start the trial on Monday. Now, the clinical research world that I've learned in the last couple of years, it takes about 13 weeks for a contract to get signed, for a piece of paper to get executed. In that time, 150,000 cancer patients die. And if you take the top 6 disease killers just in America, there we go. We're talking over 400,000 people that will die in the time it takes to sign a piece of paper. Now, your clinical research won't help all of them, won't help almost all of them. But how many patients and families are out there waiting for that chance to live a longer life, a healthier life, a better life, a life with a better quality? If you don't remember anything else from this besides my kids' pictures, because they're pretty cute, remember this. The next time something comes across your desk that might wait until tomorrow or next week, or you just send off to someone else because it's not really your problem. Because at the end of all of this, at the end of clinical research, there's a family waiting. There we go. So, we moved the family over to the Clearwater Beach area which is a nice place to be if you have stage 4 cancer. And we're going to start this groundbreaking trial. First person to ever do this. It's going to be fantastic. I'm writing a blog about it, and the whole team is excited because we're finally getting this trial started, and they want to see what happens when you combine immunotherapies. Did the first 2 doses. I had my lower lung removed, got the tumor out, sent it off, got the T cells all made. They're expanding. We have 60 billion T cells ready to go. And then they find a diverticulitis. Now, the problem with this is that as part of the treatment, I was going to get lymphodepleted. I was going to knock all my immune system out and basically change the oil. Well, if you do that with a diverticulitis and there's bacteria laying around, it's probably going to kill you, which I learned right before I was about to have the infusion. So, there we go. I had a choice, come off the trial or get a colostomy bag. Neither which option I really wanted. But that doctor told me it was the best chance of watching those kids grow up. And if a colostomy bag is what's going to take to get there, that's what we're going to do. So we had surgery to get a colostomy. We finally started the TIL in January of 2013. And high-dose interleukin-2 followed, which is a pretty difficult treatment. And we get through all of this. And in February, we finally finished the trial. And it didn't work. There's me after my scans, the Super Bowl weekend, 2013. I had lost 50 pounds, failed the trial, and now I was looking for plan B. Fortunately, and the head's supposed to move again here too. Sorry. The oncologist and I had a talk. I said, all right, look, we knew this is clinical research. I knew. I was okay that I failed. I took the shot that I wanted to give me the best chance of watching those kids grow up, and it didn't work. We knew that. That was okay. But we had plan B. And I said, all right, doc, when can we start these new therapies, this anti-PD-1 drug? And he said, well, as soon as you're done your washout period, hopefully we'll get you on the trial. And that all sounded good except for the hopefully part. I said, okay, why are we saying hopefully? Is there something that happened? Is the colostomy bag, is that going to exclude me? What's going on? And he said, well, the one trial that we have, we're still waiting for the contract to be signed. Oh, here we go again. Fortunately, that week, a melanoma advocacy organization had reached out to me about the blog I was writing and said, hey, we're doing a run. Would you want to be a part of it? I said, sure, that sounds great. By the way, TJ, how is your treatment going? And I showed her that picture right there. I actually sent it to Catherine. So this is how it's going. I lost 50 pounds. I failed a trial. And I'm about to play contract roulette with Big Pharma for the second time in 4.5 months. She said, let me call you back. This is where the head's supposed to move. There is a trial very similar to the one that you want at a cancer center 4 miles from your house instead of 4 hours away. I said, wow, that's awesome. Do they have a signed contract? She said, yeah. So we took our family and moved back to Fort Lauderdale. I made a very difficult decision to leave one of the best melanoma research teams in the world, and an amazing doctor, to go to a very small clinic that didn't even have a melanoma specialist, but they had the medicine that I thought was going to give me the best chance of getting that durable response. So here's me in April of 2013, getting my first dose of what was then known as MK3475. It sounds very clinical. Here's me 4.5 years later. I'm getting my 75th and last dose of what is now known as Keytruda. one of the anti-PD-1 drugs that has been extremely effective, not only in melanoma, God bless you, but also in a number of other cancers. It's the drug that has saved Jimmy Carter's life. So basically, I saved the president, is how I like to put it. And when we went off the trial, when we went off the drug, I'm actually still on the clinical trial. I still do scans and give them blood to see how long-term responders do and how this affects other patients when they come off. But the reason I came off the trial, or came off the drug, was this. Come on. Usually I'm better at this, sorry. We got a scan report in the summer of 2017 that said malignant disease is not suspected on the basis of this examination. For the first time in almost 5 years, someone told me I didn't have cancer. And that was a pretty good moment. Oh, I didn't even know it did that. So, what can I do, and what can you do? And maybe more importantly, if you are in my shoes, what would you want someone that has your responsibilities, your opportunities to help other people, what would you want them to be doing? I touched on the things that were my goals. Got the durable response. I got healthy. Ended up being an usher in the wedding. I started doing things like coaching soccer. And I can tell you for sure that when I listed my goals, because I did list them in the hospital on my phone, I don't think I put coach 4-year-old soccer on there. If you've done this before, you understand why. If you haven't, just trust me here. It might not be one of the goals you put at the top. And it wasn't one of mine until one day someone told me I wouldn't be here. And now my favorite day during soccer season is Thursday, because I go from Tommy's practice to Josie's practice, dragging kids around. It became a goal. It helped fulfill that purpose of being a dad. I got healthy. Actually, I got a little too healthy and had to lose a few of those pounds back off again. One of the goals that I had set as a teenager was to finish a triathlon. And my dad was really big. He's like, put your goals on your bathroom mirror. And I put them on my monitor so that's where I see. The first thing I see in the morning usually is my screen. And I put, be a triathlete. And 2.5 years after my diagnosis, this is me on Fort Lauderdale Beach. I thought I would be swimming from one island in Hawaii to another. Didn't quite happen that way. But here's me finishing a sprint triathlon in Fort Lauderdale. It's not that impressive. I made it across the line. The most important, the best part of this isn't that I finished, which is somewhat miraculous. It's the guy in the white shirt there. He's the ER doctor who admitted me for the first time. He's become a friend, an occasional training partner, and he's also become a cancer patient who's called me for advice on how to navigate his diagnosis. I actually talked to him this morning. I got to my cousin's wedding. She insisted I wasn't going to go, and I told her there's no way in hell I was going to miss this. And since we live 3 hours from Orlando, we get to go to Disney World all the time, which may or may not be a great goal. The purpose started, it became, for me, being a survivor became having that purpose of being a dad. Little check boxes go here. It's not just those little goals that I set on my phone, but the things that became goals and purposes along the way. I'm dance dad now on Tuesdays and drive the girls back and forth to dance. We take our family on vacations. For a long time, all of our family planning was done in three-month cycles, because that's about how long I had between scans. Now we can plan for the summer, take the kids on a whitewater rafting trip. I actually became a football coach, and coach in Fort Lauderdale for one of the best high school programs in the nation. And we started doing other things like Tough Mudders and climbing mountains. This is at the top of Mount Katahdin in Maine, the very northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. And I had a friend say, why do you do this stuff? You're crazy. You're doing these long bike rides, charity bike rides for cancer. And for me, it was a pretty easy answer. One is because I'm still here to do it. I can do it. Part of it was that I needed to know that I could. When you lose some of your physical abilities, or a lot of them, you want to know that, hey, I can still do this. And the third part was, because I was still writing about this, because I was active as an advocate, I wanted to show other people that they could do it too. That if you're in a hospital bed, getting a cancer diagnosis, if you're walking out of an oncologist's office and you hear those words, you have cancer, and you start Googling melanoma, immunotherapy, anti-PD-1, that there's hope that you can do it too. Because not everyone gets the response that I did. These are a couple melanoma patients along the way. A young lady in college in Georgia, a lawyer at the Jersey Shore, a captain in the Army, two advocates that I met in my journey. A woman named Christine Pierre, who ran the Society for Clinical Research Sites, if any of you are familiar with that, who called me one day and said, I have ocular melanoma. Am I going to die of this? Well, I got my response. But not everybody got their response. So my other purpose is to bring this message to the pharmaceutical industry, to the clinical research world, to each one of you who have a chance to affect the lives of patients who may not get the response that I got. This is what I do. I still get to write. I get to speak about my journey, the difficulties I encountered, and how I had to overcome some of those obstacles. I even get a chance to work in the industry as a patient advisor to some pharmaceutical companies, to a group called Transcelerate, which is a 501c3 that is sponsored by some of the biggest pharma companies in the world who are looking to make clinical trials better, faster, more effective. And I'm their patient voice. Think about how humbling that is, that there's these billion-dollar companies sponsoring all of these initiatives to help other patients, to help other people, to help each one of us. And I'm the one that gets to represent all of those voices. This is what I can do. Think about what you can do. Because in the end, someone you love is going to hear words one day that are similar to, you have cancer. It might be a chronic disease, it might be some other form of illness, but someone somewhere is looking for that longer, better, happier life. And they need to find the right medicine at the right time for them. So, for all of those people who I very humbly stand here and represent, thank you for what you do. You make the life of people around the world, not just the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. You make their lives better. For all those names you'll never know and people you'll never see, but whose lives you affect forever, thank you for what you do. Thank you for having me here today, and I'll take any of your questions. Thank you. for decades has been that we're doctors and we're going to tell you what's wrong with you and how to get better. I know one of the best examples was someone told me until the 70s or 60s that prescriptions were still written in Latin. So the mindset that isn't that long ago is that doctors were informing patients. Now with the explosion of information, both good and bad, out there, it's become an informed patient is one who wants to know about their condition, wants to know what their options are, and wants to be a part of the team that's going to design their treatment. You're not going to get people that the first thing I did was to go Google melanoma. I mean, that was 19 years ago. The patients today are not going to be able to just listen to a doctor. What the advice I would give to the clinicians, to doctors, would be help guide the patients to the right resources, because it's overwhelming. I could tell you, spending 16 days, on this phone, searching, that the amount of information is overwhelming. And it's not all good information. And there's a reason that clinicians don't want patients to just Google and come back with, well, here's 20 trials I found, and here's the cure for cancer with baking soda, and here's this and that. There is legitimate reasons to want your patients to not drive themselves crazy with a Google search. So the balance of finding the right information without limiting their ability to be educated is a difficult one. My suggestion would be to gather as many good sources of information as possible, and somewhat diverse. Not every opinion is the same. Even if you just take melanoma, there's targeted therapy specialists and immunologists. There are people that are still treating with biochemotherapy, and none of those there are better or worse options, but they all have very legitimate treatments. So exposing patients and the people that are going to help them do research to good sources of information that will be understandable, that will give them the right information without giving them the wrong stuff. That's the best advice I could give if you are in a clinic and you have someone that comes in and says, hey, well, my Google search just told me that this is what I should ask you. Because there's like the dueling coffee mugs. Your Google search does not replace my doctor degree. And there's also the second part of that is that my living with a disease, and this is more chronic conditions, my living with a disease for 20 years doesn't necessarily isn't trumped by the one semester class you had in 25 years ago. So the sooner that both patient and physician become a team together to understand, to get the right understanding and get the right information, the better the experience will be for both of them.
Hello. Okay. Hi, my name is Danny. I'm a medical student from VCU. Thank you for coming here to give us this wonderful talk. Was there anything else other than the bias that was just mentioned? Was there anything else that you wish doctors and nurses and pharmacists, anyone from the healthcare team that they could have done better to help you through this difficult journey?
Yes. Yes, and not really. For my particular journey, knowing about clinical trials and the options I had up front would have been really good. And I used the illustration from the first doctor who actually told me I couldn't do targeted therapies. And he actually did give me a sheet that listed like 4 or 5 clinical trials, and they were all for targeted therapies. Well, this doesn't help. I had to understand that, okay, he just told me that my BRAF status doesn't allow me to do this. So the ability or the discussion of treatment options, that they include things that are not in my clinic or in my practice, here are your options. And you may need to go somewhere else for options C, D, and E, or I don't know enough about E and F, but you may want to consider that because they are now either in trial or there have been approved treatments. We just don't offer them here. That would be one thing that's huge. And I understand that it's not always easy to have your 7.5 minutes, that Medicare lets you have with a patient to get everything in there, which is why I would encourage everyone that's involved in the healthcare visit, from the time you walk into the physician office to the time you leave, that everyone is educated on at least a minimal amount of how to guide a patient to the right information, kind of like we just talked about. That patient journey doesn't begin and end when the doctor walks in and out of the room. It starts when you get out of the elevator and you sign your name in. And it doesn't end until you get back in the car on the way out. And there are a number of touch points there where someone who's a receptionist can hand you a tablet and say, hey, here's your condition. We have a couple of videos here that might help explain what this is, or will give you some background. Or the research assistant who may be able to guide you to an advocacy group or to clinicaltrials.gov and say, here are some trials that might be appropriate for you. You might want to do more information or do more research and get more information outside of our visit. All of those are opportunities to educate someone who has most likely heard you have X disease and doesn't know enough about it and isn't sure what to do and is looking for guidance. And there are all those opportunities to give them that guidance that too often kind of pass without having a good interaction.
Thank you. This is Tamás Gál. I work for VCU in research informatics, and my question relates to basically what you've been talking about, but from another direction. So do you think that it's important to maybe give patients some tools that prepare them to the doctor's visit, to maybe give sample questions that are important to ask, or what they would focus on, instead of just trying to drink from the fire hose?
The best way to prepare someone is to give them information. And you're going to get a wide variety of, I don't know anything about this, and people who don't really want to know a lot about their condition. Those people exist. That I don't really want to know what this is. I just want you to make me better. To the opposite, where I'm going to be, on my phone Googling every chance I get, what is this? Yes, there should be some baseline information given. I don't know if sample questions are the best thing, but if you can offer all of your patients for a given condition, here are the basics of the condition, the science part of it. So here is what goes on in the background. If you want it, you can have it. Here is what life is going to be like with this condition, which is just going to be as important as the disease itself. And then here is what to expect. And I think that third part is probably the most difficult, because it's an unknown. We can't say for sure what's going to happen to you. We can tell you what the science may suggest, but one thing that probably as clinicians you can think of is just talk to patients like we were hanging out here, like we were sitting and having lunch together, and not so, well, the science shows. The reason I came off my trial isn't because I got the scan. It's because 4 months before that, I went to a melanoma conference and I sat next to Patrick Hu, who's one of the best oncology researchers in the world. And I gave him I told him, I think we're good. We've had a couple scans. Nothing is changing. And he looked at me and goes, Dad, I would consider you cured if you were my patient. Like, just off the cuff. And I go, well, you're the head of all research at MD Anderson. How am I going to argue with you with that? But all the other conversations I've had, well, the research shows this. Sometimes patients just want to hear you talk to them, person to person. And when you take all that other stuff and you give them all the other information, then you just have a quick conversation. Here's what I would, and I use the example. You told me this is what you would do if you were me, if you were 37 years old. I've had a few of those conversations along the way, and they've been the most enlightening ones, because in the end, it's my decision to make, And I can either make it myself with my C in biology in college, or I can make it with the assistance of you and your doctorate degree. That conversational insight helps patients more than giving maybe the informatics of a disease and the percentages that might change based on a treatment type.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm here in patient counseling in VCU. And my question kind of piggybacks on the person who asked, could the team have done anything further? It was very poignant the way you included that slide of those who didn't make it. And one of the things I'm curious about is from your diagnosis and all along, we're in an age that we talk about holistic medicine and holistic care. Did the team take initiative to talk with you about, you're clearly a very resilient person, you blog, you process your emotions. You know, there must have been anger and fear and all those things. Did the team talk with you about, who do you talk with? Do you have a counselor? Do you have a chaplain? Where do you let it all out? Because clearly you took a real positive, you were able to reframe things and really go, you know, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to be the first, as opposed to see that as a death sentence. Did the team talk about that or take any initiative, or was that really all from you?
Basically, no.
Right.
Which I'm sure is not surprising.
And I'm a chaplain, so I'm always and we train folks, and it's just psychologists, counselors, nobody really talked to you about, hey, who do you let it all out with and get that out?
Mostly no. During the second trial, yes. And early on in the second trial, someone from the hospital outside of my medical team came up to me. We have these services. They introduced themselves, showed me what it was. I got the brochure at Moffitt, and that was basically the extent of the conversation. Here is where you can go for support if you need it, and that was it. I would say that there were varying levels of care of the person, and I know on the second trial, the first doctor I had on the second trial, and this is a little confusing, probably had the worst bedside manners of anybody I've ever seen, and had just walked out of the room once when I challenged him on something. Since then, I've seen that there is a much better, the new oncologist is much more engaged with me. Specific programs or how are you dealing with this outside of what your tumors are doing? It wasn't more than just presented to me. There wasn't the mental health part. There was never a check-in on that. Hey, are you doing this? Is your family? How's your wife doing? How are your caretakers doing? We could be here for another hour talking about the burden on caretakers and how difficult it is for them. For me, it was pretty simple. It wasn't easy, but it was simple. And it's much harder on someone who has almost all the shared risks and a fraction of the support. So to answer your question, not really, not very much. The programs exist, but they're not really integrated. They're just sort of kind of bolted on and don't have that integrative feel, at least in my experience.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. To that point, if I could just...
I'll come back, don't worry. I won't forget you. Go ahead, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, okay. So
you guys can fight it out.
So to the point that you just addressed about having support, at VCU we've talked about, can we use Uber to help pick up people who, maybe they can get somebody to take them downtown once a month, but when you're asking them to get somebody to watch their kid and bring them downtown, once a week for 12 weeks, it's a different situation. Mm-hmm. And, we've talked about, we have dogs on call, dog therapy, we have some art therapy, art education, we have a lot of this programming. And we recently talked about, kind of wrapping up some of that and being able to offer it specifically to research participants. Things that I think would address some of the needs that you just brought up. But then we struggle with if you're wrapping it up for a research participant here's your package, is it coercive? Are you treating them differently than you are the patient down the hall?
it's hard to argue that it's not, even if the intent isn't there. The goal is to get the patient to the trial, to get the patient to the medicine that they need. So if you are helping overcome barriers, I don't see an issue with that. You're not paying patients thousands of dollars to try a drug. This is not, this is certainly in line with what the regulatory environment would say is okay. You are asking a lot of a participant, and there should be some consideration as to make the impact on their lives as minimal as possible. If that means that you have someone to watch their kids or walk their dog, or you give them some emotional support while they're getting it, I don't see that there's a negative to that. In the bigger picture, if that helps patients find the right medicine, and then from that helps trials fill and keeps people adherent, and that ultimately gets medicines to patients quicker, I don't know that that's a bad thing.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I didn't forget about you.
Thanks. I just had a question about, you talked about it at the beginning that you talked to pharma and you just kind of left that phone call. You made a phone call and then it kind of miraculously happened a few days later that you got on the trial. And I wondered, were there several phone calls after you made that phone call? What happened?
No, I never heard back from them. And my doctor, clear as day, said, I don't know what you did, but you did something. It could have just been that it was already in progress and it just makes for a good story. But no, they never got back to me, and we left it. I didn't leave it with any really to do. I kind of put it on there. They're like, well, we'll look into it and we'll get back to you. And then a few days later is when my oncologist called. He did say that we heard from the sponsors, so it didn't specify if it was the one that I had talked to or not. There's probably a feeling that someone somewhere heard something and was like, well, we better do something about this before he starts calling tomorrow and the next day. But no, they never closed the loop on that for me, and there was no communication. I've since met a number of people who work for the company, and I try not to talk about who it was, because it's better if they don't know which one's which, because it could be any of the pharma companies, so I don't tell them who it is. But I've heard a number of times how that is such a commonplace thing that we hear from patients and we never get back to them. We don't really know how it affects them. And I've been fortunate enough, I get to sit here and tell them all about how it affects real patients, but there's plenty of patients I'm sure have similar stories that just kind of get lost.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I asked because the legal part of trials can take so long, and so I was just wondering if there was something else that you did, but thank you very much.
No. I still do it. I still rail on, and every time I go to one of the big pharma companies, I look for the legal department and try to find somebody to push this along. And go ahead.
Hi, TJ. I just want to say I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm actually in sponsored programs here at VCU, so we are the folks that negotiate the clinical trials. We dot the I's and cross the T's. And I can't tell you how much my heart sank when you said that your care was delayed because of the contract. My group has been trying pretty hard, at least I think, because I'm in charge, to try to streamline this whole process. And one of the overall goals is really to try to get this done in such a manner that patients can be enrolled in these trials quicker. From a patient's perspective, do you have any ideas how we could accomplish that with the pharma companies? And I'm not putting the blame on them by any means, but it's such a prolonged process. The contracts, you heard somebody say that the consent form was 30 pages, the contracts are 30 pages as well.
I've gotten to read a number of them too, and they are not fun, so I don't envy you sometimes. This is me actually in the professional world as a professional patient advisor. There are a few initiatives that are trying to make the contracting process cleaner. Part of it is that this affects every trial out there has to go through this. So the woman who you saw at the end, one of the patients that didn't make it, she actually heard the story and started something called CLEAR, which is, it's SCRS is the organization, and they are trying to standardize the most contentious 5 clauses of contracting. This is stuff that I've heard her say, and I'm just kind of pushing back out there.
Okay.
It's the collaboration part. Like, I get it as a patient, as an informed patient, I get it. Like, this is a business in a lot of ways, and there are budget negotiations, there are legal minefields to navigate, but at the end of the day, it still doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you're the best lawyer in the pharma world or the best lawyer at VCU if you're actually becoming a roadblock to getting a trial started, getting medicine started. Then someone in the industry once referred to their legal department as the business prevention department. So the best advice I have as a patient who's gone through this is that people are waiting to treat a negotiation and a contract process as if someone you love was the one who's waiting for that medicine or that treatment to come to market, to come to trial. Because I think that strips out a lot of the business part of it and puts a little humanity into it.
Absolutely.
And that's, to me, that will help whoever is on the other end of the phone understand that, hey, we're doing something here that's a little bit bigger than just trying to negotiate a business deal. This is helping to alter lives.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else, or are we ready for a break yet?
One more.
One more, sure, that's fine. I'll
DJ,
talk all day.
We all enjoyed your presentation. You can tell I'm back for seconds, right? So, to follow up on this final comment Melanie made is that sometimes there's a feeling that we as researcher and as patient subjects need to be protected from evil pharma. And now you're giving a very refreshing view here is that, pharma provided you this drug that you would have not had before. So comment a little bit about this. Is it really evil pharma? Is it really that good? Where's the balance? How do you talk about this in your business role?
Balance is probably the key word that I'll hear it. You go on Facebook and you'll see people that just rail on big pharma. And I've gotten I'm very fortunate that I get to where I left a meeting yesterday where I was in the room with 15 people that come from 13 different pharma companies, and they are collaborating to make the patient experience better. We're creating a toolkit. And I continually tell people, go talk to someone who does clinical research, who works for a big pharma. Yes, there is a business part of it, and the news is going to capture, the EpiPen going up 500% or insulin costs skyrocketing. It's very bad optics, but there are so many people that work in this industry, that work in this world, that want to do good, that it's a shame that there's not more focus on the good stories, on all the ways that pharma does do well in the world, and to hold them accountable when they don't. That's, I think, very natural. It is, again, it's a business, and there are people that are involved in pharma that are there for the business first. But I would say the majority of the people that I engage with are there because they want to make lives better. And I don't know if you're not going to do a PR campaign around that, because it will sound self-serving. But every good instance that someone has of interaction with medicine, it serves as a testament to what pharmaceutical companies do, to what clinical research organizations do, to what research universities do. Testimonials aren't good when you talk about clinical research, but they are good when you are trying to help somebody get into a treatment that they might not otherwise be aware of or be afraid of. Here's a guy I know who had a melanoma diagnosis, and this medicine helped him. Consider how his journey, and not just the clippings you read about, the guy who's jacking up EpiPen prices, because there's a lot more to it than just headlines.
Thank you.
Anything else? I'll be here, so by all means, thank you.